that is being provided by all of our emergency service teams out on the ground. I also want to say thank you to all of our police, our emergency service personnel, the ADF, and the hundreds and thousands of volunteers that are working tirelessly on the ground to protect our communities. I have heard of amazing stories from individuals that are doing amazing things. I just want to share some of those stories here this morning. Firstly, I want to acknowledge a police officer who actually was on a boat and heard a faint noise coming from inside a house. He dived through a flooded window and went to the manhole of the house. 20 centimetres from the roof of the house was a 93-year-old woman clinging onto a mattress. She was 20 centimetres from the roof. That police officer got a boogie board and was able to take that 93-year-old woman out of the flooded window and ensured that she got to safety. We also have other stories of police officers that have actually ensured that they've been able to move people that have been stranded. We've got individuals that have been stranded at Woodburn, and they've been able to ensure they've moved them to Evans Head, so areas where they've been safe. Ensuring then that Pole Air can get food to those individuals that have needed it as well. I want to stress that at the moment in the north of the state, it is about making sure that we respond and we recover those communities that are continuing to do it tough. I want to stress that we are seeing the recent rainfall pattern still continuing to move south. Over the coming days, it is going to be tough here in the places of Sydney, and it's also going to be tough further in the south of the state. But today the focus is on Sydney. We are expecting heavy rainfall over the afternoon, into the night and into tomorrow. Warragamba Dam started spilling at 3 a.m. this morning. I say to those people in the areas of Richmond and Windsor, if you get a knock on the door, if you are asked to leave, please leave. Please do this for your own safety. Please do not contemplate on staying. You need to be prepared, and you need to be prepared now. We are looking at substantial rainfall over the coming days. We don't want to see those images of where people were standing on the roofs of their houses, not leaving, and then having to be rescued. You are putting our emergency service life at risk as well. Please do the right thing and don't risk your life at this point in time. I'll also announce today that tomorrow an additional 90 police will be heading north. They'll be actually providing additional support when it comes to our evacuation centres and in ensuring that we have high visibility police on the ground. I'll now hand over to Darren from the Bureau of Meteorology.
Great. Thank you, Deputy, and good morning, everyone. My name is Dean Narramore from the Bureau of Meteorology, and there's a lot to cover over the next few minutes. And I'm going to start for our residents in the northeast parts of New South Wales. It has been a devastating time in that part of the world, as we all know, and thankfully the rain has eased today, but moderate to major flooding is still occurring on numerous rivers in northeastern parts of New South Wales. And the Bureau, we're currently focusing on overnight tonight and into tomorrow, where we may see rounds of showers and thunderstorms moving into the area. Of particular concern is early tomorrow morning and throughout the day. During the day, we could see hit and miss severe thunderstorms, bringing heavy rain, damaging winds, and possibly even large hail. Now, while it won't be widespread and everywhere, isolated communities and already those currently recovering from all the flooding could have impacts there as well. And heavy rainfall associated with these storms are likely to lead to renewed creek, river and stream rises as well on already saturated soils and catchments. So we've got a break now, but unfortunately some more shower and thunderstorm activity is on the way tomorrow. It will be hit and miss, but it still could produce some severe storms with heavy rain, large hail and damaging winds, which is going to impact the ongoing recovery efforts up there. Now, moving further south, we saw widespread moderate to heavy rainfall last night from Newcastle south towards the Wollongong and Illawarra area. Generally 30 to 50 millimetres. Penrith saw around 70 millimetres, and we've seen some isolated totals in excess of 150 millimetres. Now that rain is going to continue today from the Hunter all the way down through to Sydney metropolitan area and down into the Illawarra as well, extending inland towards the Blue Mountains and of course over the Warragova Dam catchment area as well. We have numerous warnings current and I'll cover them now. Severe weather warnings are current for heavy rainfall and damaging winds, extending from the south coast of mid-north coast all the way down and towards the south coast of New South Wales. So that does include the communities of Newcastle, Sydney metropolitan area, Wollongong, inland towards the Blue Mountains, and also the communities as we move down into the south coast of New South Wales. We could see widespread 50 to 150 millimetres in this part of the world, with isolated totals in excess of 200 millimetres. Now these totals will likely, particularly around the 200 millimetre mark, can lead to life-threatening and dangerous flash flooding, which can lead to very dangerous activities if you're driving, and also if you live on, if you live on or near any creeks, rivers or streams anywhere on the central coast of New South Wales, down through Sydney, Wollongong and to the south coast of New South Wales. It is vital that you stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings, as this is continuing to be a rapidly evolving and changing event. Now, not only do we have severe weather warnings out, flood watches are also current for large stretches of the New South Wales coast, extending from the mid-north coast all the way down towards the Victorian border. So many of our river catchments in this part of the world, extending inland to the ranges, are also under a flood watch, as this widespread rain is likely to lead to flash and riverine flooding. Now, obviously, there's also focus around the Hawkesbury Nepean River, one of many rivers that are going to be experiencing flooding in the coming days, and I'll touch on that right now. We currently have a minor to major flood warning current for the Hawkesbury Nepean area, and that'll continue. We could see a minor to moderate flooding develop this afternoon around the Richmond and Windsor area, more so into this evening. Then that could escalate overnight and into tomorrow as this rain continues to fall during the day. It is important, as you heard earlier, if you live in Richmond, Windsor or anywhere in the catchment of the Hawkesbury Nepean River, please stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings via our website, app and social media, and they'll continue to be updated continuously throughout the day and tonight, as we have a team of experts working 24/7 on all the rivers across New South Wales, and we'll continue to cover that in the coming days, and we'll continue to keep you updated as well on our website. So to reiterate, severe weather warnings current from Newcastle down to the south coast of New South Wales for heavy rainfall and damaging winds. The heavy rainfall could likely lead to flash and riverine flooding, dangerous and treacherous driving conditions, and damaging winds up to 90 kilometres an hour, particularly on coastal locations, could also bring down trees and power lines. We also have hazardous surf warnings current for almost the entire coast of New South Wales, as strong onshore winds and all the rivers exiting out into the ocean is leading to possible coastal erosion, particularly on the high tides for our beachside and coastal communities, and obviously any communities around the river's mouth. And we've also got, as I mentioned, numerous minor, moderate and major flood warnings out. And throughout the Sydney area, we've got minor to major flood warning current for the Hawkesbury Nepean, and we could see at least minor flooding develop as far eastwards as the Penrith area, but they'll continue to develop as the rain continues to fall. This situation will continue to escalate as well. So I just advise anyone living in anywhere across central and south coastal New South Wales, just be weather aware. Continue to stay up to date with the latest forecast and warnings, check the radar, and always listen to all advice from emergency services. And with that, I'll hand you over to the Commissioner to give us some more details on that.
So thank you, everyone. So that means that the SES area of operations is between the Queensland border and the Victorian border. So starting at the top at Northern Rivers, we are going through with police on a search and rescue mission just to see if there is anyone in need or trapped in houses, and going through the houses in the Lismore area. There are still evacuation orders in place, and I would remind the community that it's dangerous to go into that area until we declare it safe. We're also starting where the waters have slowly receded into doing damage assessments, making sure that we can declare those houses safe and try and let the community and business owners back into those premises as soon as possible. At the same time, we're now preparing for the latest weather forecast of the rains that will come back. So again, really important for the community to be aware of the messaging we put out and not go into those areas that are under evacuation orders, and to be aware where the warnings are. So the area goes down through the Northern Rivers area into the mid-north coast, and we're working with those communities in relation to the flooded areas and making sure that those communities are aware of their danger and still heed our warnings. At the moment, we are being called out on numerous flood rescues in the Ballina area where there is an evacuation order as well, and the waters have peaked, but there is a high tide and it will be a while before those waters recede. So again, a great danger to the community. Down through the Central Coast, we're now into operations in the metropolitan area with the forecast slightly changing in that the weather, this east coast low is hanging around a little bit longer than we had thought, had come a little bit later than we had thought, but are bringing intense rainfalls and thunderstorms. So it is really important for those communities around that area to be aware of their risk in their community, to prepare if we have evacuation warnings, to prepare to evacuate their premises, to make sure you have your valuables, your documents, make sure you and the family know your escape plan, how you can get out, and also any animals that might be in that area. And certainly around the Warragamba Dam there is a lot of domestic and stock animals, and you really need to action your plans now to prepare for the safety of yourself, your families and your animals. So some of the areas that we're looking at around the Hawkesbury-Nepean floodplain are the same areas that were affected last year with substantial flooding, and we're expecting this might be as bad as we saw last year, and we know the devastation that caused in the community. And what we don't want to do is lose any more lives. And the best way we save our lives is to be prepared and listen to the warnings and the orders that the SES and other agencies put out for your safety. I remind people that you may not be inundated in your houses, but your routes of evacuation may be cut off, and may be cut off very quickly. So just because you cannot see the water doesn't mean that we aren't asking you to leave those premises and get out on the highways and roads surrounding your premises so that you are safe. And I hope that when you return to your homes, there is no damage and that you got out and saved the life of you and your families. So looking at going down further down to the south coast, we're putting out a lot of messages both in the metropolitan area and also down on the south coast to make sure those areas in the Illawarra, the Shoalhaven and further down to the Victorian border are aware of your risk and what you have to do. These are devastating storms. An east coast low brings thunderstorms and floods which are life-threatening. I can't emphasise that seriousness enough. So please listen to the messaging. We have lots of information on the SES website. If you need assistance from the SES and our partner agencies, ring 132 500, and if it is life-threatening, ring 000. I just want to say to the community, not only have we as many volunteers in the SES out there helping the communities, we're also supported by Rural Fire Service, Fire and Rescue, other emergency service agencies and the assistance of the Australian Defence Forces. We've pre-positioned helicopters down around Nowra so they can help in any calls for assistance from the community in the metropolitan area or the south coast. We still have a large number of helicopters up north that are helping, and as I said, around the Ballina area particularly. And we've got troops on the ground as well to help in some of the messaging. So we are actively door knocking, we're actively letting everyone know. But it is impossible to door knock in every house that is at risk during this event. So please be aware of the messages out through the media and on our website and on the Bureau of Meteorology's website. Look at the radar, and if you're unsure about the roads, have a look at Traffic Live, and that will assist you in making sure that you can travel in the safest way. As forecast by the Bureau as well, there could be intense thunderstorms over small areas, and that brings the risk of driving through floodwaters. Time and time again we give the message out, do not drive through floodwaters. You don't know what is under the water. You also don't know what damage has been done to the roads or the bridges. So if there is water in front of you on the road, turn around and find another way to go to your destination. And although we're not saying keep off the roads, think about, do you have to travel on the roads? And if you don't have to travel today, tomorrow, it's probably not the reasons that you would go out and drive on the road. So be safe, keep your family safe, look after your community members and listen to our warnings and take heed when we give you an order to evacuate. Please evacuate. Thanks.
Deputy Premier, we're hearing reports of a motel or a hotel in Lismore where the bodies of at least 4 people may or may not have been found. Can you comment on that or confirm?
Well, I can't confirm that information, and I think at the moment the worst thing we could do is actually speculate or actually have any fear or scaremongering going on. I will release those details, the police will release those details once we have confirmation of incidences or loss of life. What I said this morning was that we actually have recovered a third body this morning. That was a male in the CBD of Lismore. That now takes our total death to 4. This is terrible. I mean, this is terrible. One life lost is one too many, but these are communities that have been impacted. These are families, these are loved ones that have been impacted by these losses.
There is a high chance of Sydney flooding. What is the government doing to mitigate that damage, including through water being released from the Warragamba Dam?
Well, we know that Warragamba Dam started to overflow at 3 a.m. this morning. We know that there have been releases being given in place before that as well to ensure that we could mitigate so that more water could be held back behind the dam wall. We don't know over the coming afternoon into the night or even tomorrow where that rainfall is exactly going to fall, how heavy it is going to be. We do know the predictions are heavy rainfall, so there is a real likely risk of flooding. People have experienced this 12 months ago, but we say to people at this point in time, don't risk it, be prepared. You may get a knock on the door, be ready to go. Don't second guess this and don't think about it. But I do say, I think today is an important message for those that want to stand in the way of building dams or raising dam walls. You know, this actually impacts on people's lives. It impacts on protecting people's property. I say to those people, get out of the way. You know, stop coming up with excuses and not allowing these dams to be built or raised in where they need to be. Stop using the excuse of a moth. That is not good enough. You know, a moth should not be some precedent to actually say that is better or more important than human lives. I say that protecting property and protecting lives should be the #1 priority, not protecting some moth. You know, look at those images. Look at those images of people up in the north of the state standing on roofs, you know, losing everything, losing their homes, their property. We don't want to see that happening, and that's why we should be actually building more dams and raising dam walls.
Are you expecting the conditions around the Hawkesbury and Nepean area to be comparable to what we saw in the March floods last year?
Well, I think, you know, hearing from the Bureau of Meteorology, there is real concerns. There are real concerns over the next 24 hours as to the amount of rainfall that is predicted. So I think people need to brace themselves to be evacuating if they are required to do so. Don't hold back, don't stay there, don't say that the flood waters never reached, you know, your house last time. This may see more people needing to be evacuated. People need to be on alert and on alert right now.
I know we saw in the north earlier that probably because there have been so many floods there previously, people were a bit more hesitant to evacuate. Are we seeing the same now in these new areas that are being hit, and is that a concern for the South Coast?
Well, I think it is, and some people have used, you know, old data. They've talked about where previous floods have gone and where previous records have been hit. But this was actually 2 metres higher than the previous record. I mean, we're talking about a flood waters at 14.4 metres. That's 2 metres greater than what we previously had seen. So there were some people who were actually trapped in their homes, didn't actually think the flood waters would actually reach their house. So there are properties that have been impacted this time round that weren't impacted previously. So we just don't want people to risk it. Just don't risk it. Just get out, be prepared. And I think at the end of the day, it's about protecting and saving your life. And don't put the SES or our emergency service personnel lives at risk as well by not following the orders that you're asked to do.
Just in terms of community welfare, people in Lismore say they're running out of food and water and diesel. They can't get access to money. What's being done to address those gaps there?
Look, obviously yesterday we had the announcement that was made by the federal government to be able to ensure that people were able to get money as quickly as possible into their bank accounts to be able to support them. We know that there are evacuation centres that have a large number of people in those areas. Where there are areas of, you know, supply chain not being able to get in or food into those areas, we are actually, you know, dropping that in by using pole air, using boats, using whatever resources we have to ensure that those communities will be fed, to ensure that those communities will get diesel for those generators if they are required.
So has that been happening? You've been dropping via chopper food, diesel, water. Where is that going, and how's that operation being managed?
Well, look, I'll have to you know, get further information there for you, but I need to say that, you know, we won't let a community have no food. We will throw everything at this. That's why we've got the ADF on the ground. We've got police. We've got SES, Fire and Rescue New South Wales, our Rural Fire Service. All of our volunteers have been focused on actually going to the north of the state. We've got teams, that have actually come from other parts of New South Wales to go into those areas to assist those communities.
Just in terms of the response to Lismore and the Mid-North Coast, people there did say that they were caught by surprise. We did see this weather happening in Queensland. Do you think the government should have acted sooner? I mean, I know it's a really rare event, but we were seeing it unfold in Queensland.
I think today you heard from the Bureau of Meteorology that everything is soaked. I mean, we've got dams that are full, our riverways are full, the ground is saturated. So depending on where rainfall lands and how heavy it is and how quickly it actually floods, that's where we're seeing areas of flash flooding. We've got levee banks up around Lismore. They're, 10 metres. No one would have predicted that we're going to see a 14.4 metre rainfall event or flooding in that area. As governments, we'll continue to look at ways that we can continue to support these communities. Today is about response and recovery. What we know is there is a big task ahead. Once those waters recede, we want to make sure that we're on the ground in those communities, helping them to rebuild as quickly as possible. And that's going to be the focus, and that's going to be important to deliver.
But we did know those areas were saturated. I mean, could we have been there earlier to wait for it as opposed to waiting and reacting once it's happened?
Well, I think, you can always say, what if, but you have to look at this. I mean, we're talking about 180 millimetres of rain that fell within a 30-minute period of time. That's 7 inches of rain in old language. But that is unfathomed. I mean, that is incredible amount of rainfall coming from the sky, landing in some part of Lismore. So it doesn't matter how high your levee banks are, you are going to see flooding with that amount of rainfall. What we need to do is to make sure that we're standing side by side with those communities, helping them to rebuild. As soon as those waters recede, we need to get in there, we need to assess the damage, we need to support councils, we need to support those individuals that have lost homes to actually rebuild the infrastructure in those communities. This won't happen in a few days. This won't happen in weeks. It won't happen in months. This will take years to actually rebuild those communities, and we need to make sure that we're standing there side by side with them delivering that.
Just on another note, prison officers have walked up, across the state have walked off the job because they feel like there was light sentencing for a prisoner who took an officer hostage. What do you say to that?
Look, I haven't got those details. Obviously, I've been out here this morning focused on the flooding and having a look at what's happening around the state. I think we want to make sure our correctional officers do an amazing job. They are in those correctional centres, ensuring that they look after those inmates, ensuring that they keep themselves safe. So if there are issues, around our inmates or our correctional officers being harmed in any way, yes, we need to look at that because this is an issue. But I certainly encourage you to ask the Minister for Corrections as well.
This question for Dean. Just in terms of the East Coast Low, yesterday you spoke about the fact that over the past few days it's been unclear the direction and the path that it's going to take. Do we have any greater clarity on that in terms of what that's going to mean for Sydney and surrounds? And is it moving in, and will we see those really problematic spot thunderstorms that you were talking about?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So yesterday it was kind of a wide range of solutions and scenarios, but overnight the lows continued to deepen and move southwestwards, and it's tracking towards the central coast of New South Wales. Now, with all east coast lows, if you are to the south of where it is, and that's where the worst conditions are, and at this stage we really expect that to be from around the central coast, the Gosford area, all the way down through Sydney, and then eventually down into Wollongong as well, particularly through today, tonight and into tomorrow. Now, those intense, life-threatening thunderstorms that I mentioned, they will be small scale, but they were likely to be impacting those similar areas as well. So while widespread areas will experience anywhere from 50 to 150 millimetres, and you might be outside going, oh, it's only a moderate rain for a few hours, but things are already saturated and the water has nowhere to go except into creeks, rivers, streams, eventually dams, and then our major river systems that run through eastern parts of New South Wales. So again, I just advise everyone just to be weather aware. You know, continue to track the radar, continue to watch our forecast and warnings. We'll be updating them regularly throughout the day and the night. That's all our flood warnings, our severe weather warnings, and even our thunderstorm warnings that may be issued later today and tomorrow for those particularly intense and dangerous thunderstorms that are likely to produce life-threatening flash flooding. And as you heard earlier, if you don't have to travel, don't. There's going to be some dangerous conditions out on the roads, possible mudslides, road closures, and many creeks, rivers and streams in flooding. So to summarise on your question, yes, the focus of that heavy rainfall really is focusing around from the Central Coast all the way down to around Wollongong, obviously including the Sydney metropolitan area, and particularly through inland as we move inland towards the Blue Mountains, where a lot of that rainfall will kind of fall as well.
Just for Shane. The natural disaster declarations, on that list, Paul Macquarie, Hornsby and the Hills have been included. Why is that? They haven't really been impacted by these floods or severe weather in the recent weeks.
Yes, well, so what we're going to look at is the current declarations up are 17 areas, and that reflects storm and severe weather events dating back for the last couple of weeks, which happens to include the greatest concentration of damage around the northeastern area of New South Wales. Over the last few months, this financial year, we've got more than 70 local government areas across New South Wales that are the subject of current natural disaster declarations. So we've seen the La Nina pattern dominating very much over the last 6 to 12 months, driving a lot of the weather behaviour, and we've seen a lot of storms, a lot of riverine flooding, covering large tracts of geographic areas around the state, including those 17 that are the subject of the latest round of natural disasters. It's not specific necessarily to one particular weather event.
And so, because the council told us it was also preemptive, so why aren't the South Coast councils or Hawkesbury in there, for example?
So I don't know where you're getting your advice that they're preemptive. They're not.
That's what the councils told us, as that's what they were told as to why they were included in this list.
No, so we're talking about the financial year, natural disaster declarations. Some councils have been the subject of multiple natural disaster declarations because there's been a frequency of weather events and disaster events that have impacted their regions. And we do preparedness work in anticipation of weather events. That doesn't mean we need to declare a natural disaster declaration to be ready for and able to deal with an event that unfolds. The natural disaster declaration centres around damage, destruction, particularly to infrastructure and community assets, and there's thresholds of damage that occurs, and we've certainly seen that on a very significant scale over this last reporting period. Indeed, over the last couple of years, if we think about the fires and the floods that followed in 2020 and what we've seen through early 21 in March, only 12 months ago, and then again throughout July all the way through to now for the current financial year.
Shane, are we setting up any evacuation centres in preparation for the areas around Richmond and Nepean, like we saw last year in March?
Yeah, so we've got active at the moment 22 evacuation centres up in northern New South Wales. All local planning committees led by the SES and the police at the local emergency operations centres pre-identify and know their preferred evacuation centres, but they are flexible in that it depends on where the flooding occurs, where the impact occurs, and getting the right mix of proximity and practicality to access and utilise those facilities, and making sure the facilities have got the wherewithal to accommodate volumes of people, i.e. some infrastructure, toilets, water, and what have you. So yes, and particularly given the recency of only 12 months ago, those facilities were practiced and utilised, and then we transitioned straight out of evacuation centres into recovery centres, which helps us through the shorter, medium and longer term.
So people in those areas could expect, if they do need to evacuate, they'd be going to the same place and doing the same process?
The authorities will absolutely advertise and promote evacuation centres once we see what unfolds, if it unfolds, with the forecast weather events.
And you mentioned yesterday you were scouting community centres, recreation facilities for temporary accommodation. Can you provide us an update on that?
So that's still occurring, but as we need to focus, as Commissioner York said, the focus in the last 24 hours remains with the preservation of life and the security of people that have been displaced. Ballina was a considerable focus overnight with evacuation centres being established and the movement of considerable numbers of people, the relocation of critical facilities like the hospital and some aged care facilities. So there's been a significant focus on that, and then the more shorter and medium term emergency accommodation arrangements continue to be worked through. But as I said yesterday, that's a significant challenge right across parts of New South Wales, and we've experienced that very much in the last couple of years with the compounding and consecutive effects of disasters that we've been experiencing.
And Commissioner York, just one for you. Queensland to Victorian border, you mentioned, that's a huge area for you to be covering. Do you have enough resources and boots on the ground to address this? And also with the changing threat, I guess, for Sydney Metropolitan and down to the South Coast?
Yeah, we've got over 500 SES volunteers out there, and as I said before, very much supported by our police and emergency service agencies. We also have the opportunity for spontaneous volunteers, so a lot of football groups, community members have come in, particularly with the sandbagging in preparation, and that's really important. So I'd encourage anyone to go into the SES units where there is a risk of flooding and assist with that. So we've got a lot of resources out there, supplemented by the Australian Defence Force, which has been really valuable in the areas that we have high intense operations.
And how worried are you about further loss of life and the discovery of more bodies now that we're seeing floodwaters recede? I'm
always worried about further loss of life, and that's why we've been messaging for the past almost a week now about this event, that it is a high risk event, it is life-threatening, and we want to make sure that the community heed those messages, because I don't want anyone to lose their life as a result of these thunderstorms and east coast low that is coming through. And really it's a matter where we have to work in partnership with the community, and we want them to make sensible, safe decisions to look after themselves and their family.
And focusing on the far north coast, with the expectation there could be more loss of life, do we have any rough figures as to how many people are unaccounted for, or is the communication still quite difficult around there at the moment?
Well, communication is quite difficult. It's intermittent in relation to the telco authorities, who we're working very closely with to make sure that we can have as least interruption as possible. We've also got the Find Reunite site through the Red Cross, so that people can log their concerns if they can't get onto any family members or friends, so that we can search through the evacuation centres. We can see if people have just gone to family and friends or had to go to evacuation centres, so that we can make sure that they're safe. And that's why we also have the search mission going on particularly around the Lismore district, in relation to searching the houses, just to make sure that they're safe.
Sorry, can I just confirm the death toll? Is it 3 or 4?
It's 4. There was one earlier on the Central Coast, but there has earlier this week, but there have been 3 in the Lismore area in the last 24 to 48 hours.
And do we have any rough figures as to how many homes still need to be searched around the Lismore area?
I don't have those figures, because we've got multiple teams going out, and they're going from home to home, business to business, just to make sure it's safe. They don't come back to record those details. Obviously the intention and the priority is to get through as many properties as possible. But you must understand also, when you look at the vision, there's still premises underwater. So we're getting around on the boat, we're doing what we can, but some of those premises so far are inaccessible, and the water is receding quite slowly. And as said by the Bureau, if we have these further rainstorms, that will impact that area again significantly.
Is the North East still the epicentre of the crisis at the moment, or is that risk level changing as Sydney Metropolitan and further south, and you're having to move your resources there?
I have a number of epicentres. The Northern Rivers, obviously, particularly around the Ballina, that's the one today, and overnight, but also this preparation for the Metropolitan and South Coast. So we have a number of command centres that are working at the same time on a number of different areas. So it's not like I can move the resources around. They're all looking at their area of responsibility and helping those communities that they're looking after. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to put your thing over. I did not.